So I'll do a quick agenda on what we're going to talk about, and why you're ultimately here. So we'll talk a bit about who we are, ultimately what we're doing, the space of what we're doing within immersive learning, model design reviews, and what value cases we're getting from there, and then some of the pilot stuff that we're working with in augmented reality in the field. This photo is near and dear to my heart. It's when we first created the organization, we went through, well, what do we actually have as the potential logo? And I explained the first time that my daughter put on a VR headset, and that shock and awe whenever you jumped inside VR. There's not much words that can explain anything better than a visual like that. I mean, if you've got your youth at this point in time putting on a headset and feeling like they're completely transported to another world, it's a powerful technology, and that power can be used in a lot of different ways. And the ways we'll talk about using it is how we use it within enterprise and have it within training.
Hey, Kyle, real quick, how old is Carolyn?
Carolyn's 6 years old now. Yeah.
So 6 years old. I think that was a. Want to share that additional thought too. Is when we created that logo, I asked Kyle how old his daughter was. You know, at that time she was 5. That should tell you something. Next generation, if she put on her headset and that was her first reaction, that should tell you something. That's how they consume that data in the future.
Absolutely. Awesome. Go for it, Nim.
So just want to touch on about our group, Immersive Technology Studios. Again, I'm just a dotted line connecting, looking out for the future for them, but we consider ourselves as one main group. We're basically a group of passionate folks, emerging technologists, pushing the boundaries of multiple realities for the sake of good. And what we mean by the sake of good is ultimately we'd like to save a life. You know, looking back in this, when we first started this, we focused on training, but we didn't dive deep into reading the safety incidents. And the minute we started reading into that and understanding how catastrophic it could be, it hit us quite a bit at home. And as mentioned, you know, Kyle is a father, so am I, and we want to make sure that folks, just like those field operators out there, they do get back home to their families as well. And so that we made that mission to say, for the sake of good, our ultimate goal is to save a life, and everything else behind that will follow.
Awesome. So taking that, you know, what do we ultimately do? That was a goal or a mission we set at the very beginning, and it was powerful. Totally suggests that if you're looking to build internal buy-in around a mission statement on what you're trying to do, there's always random tangent little lines that can come off of there, but having a mission goal of where you're trying to hit is super powerful. So we say, what are we doing? We ultimately say we're forging digital realities to better reveal and equip our reality through real-time 3D. And really, that's just a play on words of saying, how do we get better data to people quicker, so then they can either train on it or they can do better design. Left-hand side is our goal. Obviously, it's the goal of what we're trying to do, is how do we use it to potentially save a person's life. And then ultimately on the right-hand side, we'll talk a bit more around what we're doing from a design perspective of taking your data and casting it visually through magic. So that's kind of our total dichotomy of the two things going on right now. I'll split those out just a bit more and talk about this continuum or kind of spectrum that we've been talking about internally. There's a lot going on within this space internally. So this is really just a glimpse over parts of the spaces that we've actually seen value cases that have extended out production wide for the company. Really, I'll start here on the right hand side first, and ultimately talk about the visual magic aspect of this. So we've if you start from these design phases, what we've been doing so far is working with the capital projects to conduct those design reviews more effectively and efficiently within VR. This audience probably gets that pretty well. If you visualize something in a three-dimensional environment that is 3D, you're gonna lower the cognitive load for a person whenever they're trying to make decisions on what they should do. We've got some pretty interesting anecdotals of people talking to us about how valuable it was or it has been for them. and how the presence aspect of it has made it a big deal. But the bigger part of this is your right-hand side. There's a lot of value on monetary value of value saved for project time and execution at the end of the day. Obviously, leading from that, you can do. There's a lot of sites doing design reviews single-handedly on their own, and then passing data back. And then there's a lot of sites that are actually doing collaboration within those spaces as well, or kind of expanding that design beyond beyond the computer at their desk and communicating across the world. Particular sites, they'll have engineering firms that are in Europe, and then ultimately have the internal Exxon engineering firms that are here in the U.S. And what better way to collaborate on those designs than do it in a more immersive way? Continuing down towards the bottom is where we start shifting into the value cases that we've been pushing towards the effort of learning and ultimately that aspect of trying to save a person's life. We split it up into these areas, these 4 ones here. There's a lot of subcategories within each of these things, but we like focusing on the aspect of what can it do from a competency standpoint. So let's put a person in an environment that they should be familiar, so that they should know exactly what they're doing in that process or that set of steps. And so we take away the training wheels. We ultimately say, let's just put a person in that environment. For instance, a marine berth operator, they have a set task to go do inspections on ultimately the berth of a marine terminal. And they should actually already be trained beforehand on what the hazards are within those particular environments. So we take those training wheels off from them and put them in the environment. They tell us what problems they see in that environment. And so they're not handheld through it, but they're presented with the problems, and they have to determine the right or wrong answers. Just-in-time training is this space of obviously, just in time. But prior to you doing a scaffold inspection, or prior to you going to work on scaffolding, let's get you into a virtual environment where we randomly replicate that environment, and ultimately let you go through those steps. You determine what those potential problems are in the scenario, or you go through your routine process. So once you get out into the field, you're way more familiar with what you're supposed to be doing. Hazard identification it blends kind of both of those particular areas, and is one of the bigger ones where we say, let's put random events of everything that we could think going wrong, and have the user ultimately identify those potential problems. And the kind of the pinnacle towards the top part here is emergency response, or the aspect of putting you in the catastrophic scenario of what happens if one of the worst events happens at a particular plant or facility, and then how does that person react to the scenario? I mean, with this technology, obviously you're able to better replicate the real world. You're getting very close to it. You're getting very close to Ready Player One, and there's scenarios of that we've worked internally of, let's get to those haptic feedbacks on your body and the actual treadmill for you to walk on, or potentially run on, and then present you with those catastrophic events. So massive value from that side that we see, but we kind of see this whole spectrum or continuum of where we're providing value cases for this tech. Cool.
All right. So as Kyle mentioned with the continuum, right, where he's basically broken it down to design reviews and immersive learning. I'm just going to share a little bit of some of our learnings from immersive learning, and really broke it down into 3 things, right? We've learned, obviously, you can train in a safe and controlled environment. It engages, excites, and enthuses our audience, facilitators, as well as trainees. And you can ingest a lot more data than traditional training methods. So I'll expand a little bit on that, and then we'll probably get into some of the portfolio examples. Training in a safe and controlled environment, obviously, well, we can deploy these solutions virtually, but aside from the HMD or the head-mounted display, as well as the PC, your content is digital. So that's really one of the benefits for us that we see. Avoiding hazards and harmful environments by training in a safe space, that's a no-brainer. We're not saying that VR training or immersive learning is going to replace the current training, but it's more of a supplement. So job shadowing is still important, and going out there to actual environment, we're not saying that that's not going to replace, but we're saying that supports it and supplements it quite a bit. So it allows folks, for example, to even doing examples of opening process equipments. We're able to do that in a safe and controlled environment in VR. Obviously, collaborate with multi-participants, either where they have a single user or multi-user, and obviously saving on time and travel since your content is virtual. Engaging, inciting, enthuse. This is from the proof of concepts and deploying some of our simulations to our local sites here in Texas to evaluate how our operators responded. And really, we noticed that, when you're doing VR and you're casting to a screen and outputting that to a massive screen and so forth, allowing folks to see what the trainee sees at first, it didn't resonate too much. And in fact, we did learn some, because if your head's moving quite a bit, that causes the audience to have a bit of, so that probably needs a third party camera. But the point is, at the end of the day, I'll give you a use case. Water draw. We brought that over. Water draw was something that they do outside and out in the field all the time. Why would you create a simulation like this? It turns out that the supervisor, after watching his peer gate and throttle, he was actually able to see as if he was in that person's body. And so they had the conversation afterwards on how they actually gated and throttled for a water draw. So that actually was a good anecdotal comment from us, from them as well. Proof of concepts is also demonstrating increasing classroom engagement. First person got 100, second person got 100, third person didn't. They wanted to get right back in, wanted to get 100, meet the same standards that the team set already, followed by the rest of the teammates saying, over there, turn around. They were helping each other. I'm standing in the back with the trainee, and he's basically saying, well, now they're doing my job. They're actually engaged and they're helping each other learn, which was powerful. Empowering facilitators to train in an interactive and immersive environment. Well, you're not just turning on a PC and saying, go ahead and run your content in VR. We provide the ability to also trigger actions and events during real time to see how the operators respond, which allows, which creates the dynamics for the simulation pretty much. Emotional value, the ability to tell a story versus just, hey, open up this page and read this, and just try to recall. But it throws you inside a story, teaches you, it builds that emotional value. So that way it just resonates a lot more. And just more data instead of just ones and zeros, right? We can track where you're looking, how far you've walked, how long you spent on this object or target, and so forth. So that's so those are some of the learnings that I want to share. We're going to jump into the portfolio, Kyle. So can you move on to the next slide? And I'll just talk about the just-in-time training, excuse me. So just-in-time training, like Kyle mentioned earlier, it's, hey, you're going to go on a scaffold today. We realize that. Can you just take this refresher course? The whole point is we want you to have the same eyes as SMEs. Look for the same, just look for the same things that you need to be looking for before you actually get out there. We understand that our SMEs are competent and they can do a good job. Sometimes people make mistakes. So you always just want to make sure you get those refreshers. And so just-in-time training, obviously, if you see that, those are the scaffold tags. We do have a scaffold or working at heights simulation that basically supports that.
Cool. And so I'll hit on the competency side and give an example. End of the day, the one that you're seeing here is around marine berth operators, and there's a really interesting simulation of scaffolding. Let's give an example. Has certain number of deficiencies, I think 20, 30 deficiencies that are randomized throughout the scenario. The one that we built for marine berth is like 283 different potential deficiencies. And what we do is we ultimately send it out to the particular sites and give them obviously an overview of what is VR, how to go through VR, and then let them free on ultimately trying to inspect. So you can see the X's over over the manifold there, and pretty much the entire ship, the entire berth area has deficiencies that are randomized, that a berth operator should have to inspect. We've actually seen some really interesting things come from that, where we place scores on whether people find all the objects or not. I don't think anybody's gotten 100% so far, which is actually a good thing. It started spurring off events where people would put together a challenge basically during their off periods, where they're all competing with each other for a gift card at the end of the day, which is amazing, right? That's a complete paradigm shift in training. You're talking about training was seen before as this thing that I've got to go listen to a bunch of PowerPoint decks to. Now these people are competing against each other and learning more. Some really fun things that we learned from the early proof of concepts of that one was the guys that went through the training when they went out to the field to go do their visual aspect of the inspections. Again, like M said, supplemental, and then ultimately going out to the field and still doing work. They would actually go out there and do X's like this when they went out to the field. And so it kind of just showed that the aspect of going in this virtual environment was rubbing off on them, and it was catching on to a point where people understood what should be there and should not be there. And even from that, that aspect of visually showing somebody in the field X's is value. Oh, we lost your audio.
Sorry, I was on mute. Probably that's good for me to unmute. I'm going to talk about the picture on the left. That's Levy stands for boiling liquid expanding vapor explosion. That's actually one of our first proof of concepts that we introduced to the business line to see whether or not this was a valuable concept for the business. And obviously, we focused on hazard ID. It's really like how I mentioned, randomized deficiencies to see if you can detect it. Why are you doing this over a levy? Well, when we first started this, I mean, the first thing is a picture is obviously worth 1,000 words, but a picture may not do justice if you're able to provide a video. And obviously with VER, you can provide multiple videos inside that technically. And so being able to communicate dry spots, leaky valves, and be able to view them from multiple angles, the scalability of 1-to-1, right there from the process designer, SME, basically told me, look, you've already provided insight on exactly what I would be doing if I had to take those folks out to those sites. I'd have to teach them exactly what they need to be looking for. But in VR, you've helped me train them and give them, somewhat of an SME. So that was our levy proof of concept.
Cool. The one on the right, just to give an example of some of the things we've done within that learning environment. This one's around kinetic stored energy. So that one's a lifting event, and ultimately, did you understand the bundle of pipes correctly, or did you notice that they were actually bundled incorrectly? Were there people in the line of fire? And really cool things that we did here is we put in this aspect of time dilation, so a person can train at slower intervals until they get to a point where they feel comfortable, and ultimately put it into real time. That came from M, thinking about the aspect of Doctor Strange and doing time dilation effects, which is pretty interesting, right? Let's change the paradigm of that training. We can slow it down and give people time to think about things, and then ultimately put them into different viewpoints that might better train them to increase that ability over time. So that paired along with the ability to go to any viewpoint within the scenario. So in this training, think of you like this external entity, right? You're really just doing a scoping of the environment. So it doesn't matter if you're standing inside the cone, because you're just giving an observation on other people. It's been very valuable to show that dilation, but also show those various viewpoints, and then show what happens afterwards. So say you select those bundles, you incorrectly select those bundles. That person in the background there is going to get hit by the back of the trailer. and allows you to kind of run through that scenario in a different manner.
Due to the interest of time, I'm going to keep this one very short, but
Yeah.
obviously these are your cost drivers. If you were to create your own simulations, we do want to talk about it. So obviously, if you have more of whatever's listed on those cost drivers, or have already planned through it, it's obviously going to help drive down the cost for creating the simulations. So the list goes on, but we'll start with 3D models. Obviously, if you have an optimized asset versus no asset, it's obviously going to be a lot easier because you're basically building an entire world. I don't need to speak more on that, but if you basically have those assets, it's going to save you time. Non-playable characters, do you need them or not, right? Is it just single player? Is it multiplayer? Or do you need also other additional players for, let's say, a man down scenario? What would you do if you crossed over somebody that was laying down and so forth? In our world, that's a pretty big deal. Animations, are they going to be static? Are they going to be interactive and so forth? But that you're probably going to need to think about that, and that requires a bit of cost on that side. The environment, are you just going to have a room? You're going to have an entire refinery facility and so forth, right? That becomes complex. Is your background going to be abstract? Is your background going to be detailed? That's going to drive up the cost as well. Locomotion is pretty interesting. Are you just going to be standing down, standing up, sitting down? That actually crosses a little bit over with safety on our aspect because of locomotion. If you're free walking and so forth with a wireless headset, right, you got to think about the safety aspects of it, or thinking about the objective of your storyline. Is teleporting the right locomotion for it, or is it swinging your arms, or actually dashing or so forth? But you really want to think about that because that's going to help for the audience to digest the content more suitable, I guess, for it. The storyline, it's the same thing as just writing a video game or making a video. You got to have that planned out in detail. If not, I mean, well, you're going to pay for that upfront cost with the developers to help build that storyline. The physics, are you going to have physics, or is it just something right out the box? You want to think about that as well. The duration of your simulation. Think about the ingestion. Right? If someone's going to be in a headset for 7 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, how many people after that? How are you going to get that? How are you going to basically get all that information digested for each operator within that classroom? So that time is pretty important. And obviously, is it going to be custom, or are you just going to take something that's generic?
And so I'll throw in one piece here that I think a really interesting thing within our field of XR is building. The talk before this was a lot was talked around standards. How do you build these standard packages for those particular types of environments? But right there's a lot of platforms that are looking at building. Here's a standard package for X, but there's a lot of variability in there. So how do I would love to see packages built for each of the different types of training scenarios within VR. It would be amazing, because then we are all on this kind of standard platform, and you focus on what matters, the training, right? The content's great, but it doesn't mean anything if it's not training anybody. I will super quickly, because I think we got 3 minutes. I'd love to leave some time.
Okay.
So we talked about that aspect of model and design reviews at the very beginning, and what has really been enabling us is those hard benefits of reducing time and reducing money on projects. I can't stress that enough. It's been a great thing for some of our large capital projects to save that time and money. And what we're talking about here is the traditional, I take your CAD or whatever visualization tool you built, your authoring tool that you built it in, I let you go through that visualization and mark up and collaborate with people across the world. Interesting thing, I'll skip down to the last point on there, where we say complete life cycle solution. At first, we really thought these basic ones were just all going to be around the design aspect, because we built these really beautiful training scenarios. Come to find out, a lot of the operators actually creating some of their operator training scenarios from just being able to walk through in a more immersive environment. So just to think about things that you can get value capture out of areas that you might not recognize at first. We thought, well, this is not gonna help. We've come to find out capital projects operators are actually creating training packages off of just being able to go through their model prior to being out in the field. Augmented reality pilots, field pilots. So we've had a lot of work within this space. And what I'll say is COVID has intensified these things, probably more so than the training that's going on in our environment, where I can't get to environments or I can't get my experts to environments. And that's increased pretty heavily. So we've been working on this particular scenario of where will the couch fit within the location. That's kind of what we call it, putting the model in the real world. Lots of platforms to be able to go down that path and value cases for that. And then the bigger one right now is the aspect of let me connect you remotely in something better than just a video feed from a GoPro or from a phone that you just hold that you're just holding a video feed. How do we actually get people to spatially be aware of their environment and spatially be able to annotate and walk people through those? So it's been a massive value add from our side that during these times we're able to look towards platforms that can give you that information and give you all the information right in front of your faces. As easy as just snapping a finger and making a call. Okay. I went through those last parts quick, but we made it. Here's contact info. Would love to know more about anything that you guys want to talk about, and would also love to just take questions in general.